We didn't support or oppose the disaster provisions, but what we said was you ought to know that the disaster provisions that are being debated in a standalone bill are exactly the same as what's in the Senate passed Farm Bill and the House Ag Committee passed Farm Bill. So it would be much easier and much more expedient if Congress would just finish the Farm Bill. Well, certainly the disaster provisions are aimed only at people who have livestock that graze. So it would help the cattle industry, sheep producers, maybe part of the dairy industry, but when you look at high feed cost, it's not going to help hogs or poultry or certainly the feed provisions in the dairy industry. As well as it didn't have anything in there for fruit and vegetable producers, many of whom cannot buy crop insurance. So as a general farm organization, we felt really important that it covered everyone. The offsets were going to come out of a couple of conservation programs. So that's problematic because those programs have been used, especially in years like this when we've got a lot of dust blowing out there, to make sure that farmers are able to conserve their soil. So they are important programs, and conservation programs already are taking hits in the Farm Bill, again, that has been passed by the Senate and the House Ag Committee. Farmers and ranchers throughout the country have to go to town hall meetings and find ways to see their members of Congress, the staff members that will go with them, and explain to them how important it is that we get this bill done. There aren't a lot of legislative days in the House in September, but there is time. This is a bipartisan bill that was passed out overwhelmingly in the Ag Committee. Let's take a bipartisan bill and move it forward as soon as possible so we can have a conference and farmers can know what to plan on as they get ready to plant the next year's crops.
I'm CEO of Southern Cotton Growers. We represent the cotton industry in the 6 southeast states, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Carolinas, and Virginia. Cotton industry was unique going into this Farm Bill debate. The main thing that we were up against was the Brazil WTO dispute, and that's been ongoing now for 11 years since it was first levied against the U.S. cotton program. And we're just now to the point where we're trying to satisfy the dispute whereby they won't retaliate with tariffs on imported goods into Brazil. But through this Farm Bill, we think we've addressed all the concerns that Brazil have, and it's kind of unique. We had to come up with something radically different than what we had in the past because, number one, we used to have a program called Step 2, which was one of the complaints. It was a way to it would make payments to merchants who would have to sell on the world market, but it was at less than what they actually paid for it. So Step 2 certificates would kick into the merchants so to keep them competitive on the world market. That was the first thing we did away with. Second thing they had to dispute over was what they referred to as a counter-cyclical program, or I always refer to as a target price. And that was the second one. Well, under this Farm Bill for all commodities, they do away with the direct payment because you just could no longer justify at these commodity prices in the eye of public consent of maintaining direct payments to farmers when they're making when commodity prices are this high. So it just wasn't the opportunity to do that. Coupled with the fact that, you know, we had to come up with significant budget savings, and this Farm Bill actually cuts over 30% out of the current expenditures for farm programs. So it's a significant cut. As a matter of fact, it's the only sector in our economy that stepped forward and has come forward and offered these cuts. No other sector, spending sector in the U.S. economy has done the same. So the reason we pursued this is because we couldn't have all the other commodities under the House bill had the opportunity of choosing either between a target price or something similar to the current acre program. In the case of cotton, since we could no longer have the target or counter-cyclical program, we went a totally different route. In our program, every other commodity is under Title I of the Farm Bill, the commodity title. The cotton program is going to be under Title 11, which is crop insurance. And our program is going to be administered through the Risk Management Agency, the RMA, versus the FSA for decades, or ASCS. That's when the program was administered. And there was several benefits for that. There's no payment limitations on crop insurance benefits. So that's one of the reasons we went that route. All the other programs that the other commodities have to adhere to, there are strict payment limitations. Another thing that's real important about the STAX program being administered through RMA, there's no means testing. And whereas under the Senate bill, it's a much more restrictive means test. Under the House bill, it's a little better. House bills, put it this way, House bill is a much better farm bill all the way around. If we could just have that one signed into law tomorrow and just ditch the Senate bill, we'd be much better off for particularly all of Southern agriculture. But in the case of the STAX program, and even for some of the grain for the other programs, they refer to as shallow loss area-wide coverage. And the reason I mention that is that it makes, you know, current base history is no longer in play, current program payment yields are no longer in play. The county will be assigned a yield, and there's a formula, and in the event that trigger's pulled, it doesn't make any difference if this farmer produced 2 bales of the acre or 60 bushel beans and this guy only 20 bushel beans and 400 pounds of the acre. If the trigger's pulled on the county, everybody gets the same payment for that particular crop. So, and another good thing about this area-wide coverage is that I know that, there's always been concern with the fraud and abuse with crop insurance. It would basically eliminate any fraud or abuse because there's no advantage of moving a commodity from one farm to another for a crop insurance loss, because if the county's not triggered, you get nothing. So, and the only other thing I wanted to mention in the case of stacks, it's shallow loss coverage from 90 to 70% of coverage. It's subsidized at 80%. The farmer will have to pay 20% of the premium, so it's a partnership where they have to put up 20% of the premium. And the other thing is that it's not a prerequisite that you have to buy up coverage. The farmer could opt just to buy the stacks portion, and not. But most farmers are going. I think in the southeast, around 86% of all cotton acres have buy-up coverage right now. So most farmers would maintain it, and they also differentiate if there's sufficient data available. You'll be able to insure your crop irrigated versus non-irrigated, which that's always been a problem, because a lot of times in a lot of situations, your irrigated land will knock out your dry land, but you had a total disaster on your dry land on a certain farm. So if sufficient data is available, then you'll be able to insure either as irrigated or non-irrigated. So.
Well, good evening. I'm Hugh Weathers, Commissioner of Agriculture, and glad to be with y'all through video. It's been many a time I was sitting right where you are in my district meeting in Coastal. But I do appreciate folks from Farm Bureau asking me and letting me visit with you this way. We proposed this year in the General Assembly that we take what we call Phase 2 of the farmers market, move into Phase 2. And that is that the state would purchase some of the privately owned enterprises on the market. When we moved out to the new market, the private investment that came along with us allowed us to save the taxpayers of South Carolina over $20+ million when we moved and chose that site, and the way we combined public and private investment. We see that to move the market to the next level, the market we all have been working so hard on for a number of years, long before I served as commissioner, but to move it to that next level, we think the state would be better served if it owned some of the other enterprises, not the ones where our vendors and our wholesalers who own and operate their own businesses, but the structures and the buildings and the sheds that accommodate and rent to smaller wholesalers. So we made that proposal to the General Assembly probably too late into the session, so we said let's drop back, use the amount of funds they gave us to look at the proposal a little longer, due diligence, I think we'll say, and have some properties appraised, so that if in 2013 we want to move back with that, we'll be ready. If we do, I certainly would appreciate if Farm Bureau would look at it as a priority of its, so that the department can get the help that's always so valuable to us as we move initiative forward. So Phase 2 of the farmers market, I'd ask you to consider that as a priority policy.
The $16 million, I guess, for the Phase 2 of the farmers market is one of those situations that came up at the end of the budget. I think most people support the farmers market. We were trying to figure out where the $16 million figure came from, and be a good responsible stewards for the state's dollars, just trying to figure out, well, is that actually worth it? That was what price that was proposed to us, and then any type of transaction you do, you got to offer, and there's always counters. And but we felt that we need to actually do an appraisal for the property to see what the property's worth. And a lot of the appraisal, the figures I think it was given us $16 million was somewhat based on revenues being able to be generated, so we need to look at those as well. And then go. That's why we actually put in the budget, I think 75,000, or actually maybe wound up being 10, up to 75 at some point, for an appraisal of the property, and then start negotiations from that point going forward. I think once we get the appraisal of the farmers market, back. We'll look at and share that with the members of the General Assembly. And obviously it's an up or down vote with the General Assembly, and it's going to take, I think, a little bit of work from the Commissioner of Ag, Hugh Weathers, point to go out there and help educate and sell the farmers market from that perspective. I do hate the fact that the way it happened, and unfortunately we live in a political world, and sound bites that it all got out there and it got political, and folks that shouldn't have been brought in and things done, it happened that way. And I wish that wouldn't have happened. I think the players involved too. You know, it's a shame that Mr. Stern got drugged through the mud the way he did, but you know, trying to prevent that from happening this time to go out. And he's been very cooperative, had several meetings, and he said, look, if I was buying something, I'd have an appraisal done too. I expect you to have an appraisal done. So he's, you know, been on the up and up with it, and hopes that we can have a deal, and I do too. Make sure we're following those and take our time doing it. And I think last year that was some of the things that got folks. It was so all of a sudden a $16 million purchase at the last minute. Bam, here it is. We got to go do it. Had a little caution to it, and it never hurts to slow things down sometimes.
Speaker Harrell appointed a study committee of the Republican caucus in the House, and they held about 8 to 10 meetings. They met for a considerable period of time. They didn't allow the public to attend the meetings except on a very selected basis. So unless you served on the committee, you really don't know what happened to the process during the process. On the 2 sales tax bills, however, they did take up one of the sales tax bills, and it had actually passed the House. Senate Finance Committee did not take it up. The study committee had said, the Republican Legislative Study Committee had said they were going to examine every sales tax exemption with a fresh eye, and they were going to repeal exemptions that had outlived their usefulness. And when the bill came out, it was fair to say considerably more modest than that. They then had a subcommittee meeting, and basically anybody who complained about any of the exemptions, such as there's an exemption for packaging. If you went to the subcommittee meeting and complained about it, the House took it out. So they did vote out, however, a pared down bill that repealed a relatively few number of sales tax exemptions. None of the agricultural exemptions were touched in the bill, with I believe one very minor exception. One thing that undoubtedly has been pushing the debate on sales tax exemption is the Bodman case. And it basically said that, to use their phrase, the whole has swallowed the donut. That our sales tax our sales tax code is so riddled with exemptions, and we now have about 85 exemptions, whereas at the time of Edward Robinson, we only had about 66 exemptions. They're saying there are now so many exemptions that it violates everyone's equal protection, and therefore the Sales Tax Act in its entirety should be abolished, or all the exemptions, strictly speaking, should be abolished. And they based their case on several blue law cases that went around the country in the early 70s. First, the Supreme Court did not have to take to court the case in its original jurisdiction. The vast majority of cases are filed in the Court of Common Pleas, and they take their 2 years to go through the court system. 2 years later, the judge rules. You then appeal it to the Court of Appeals. That takes a year and a half. And then you can petition to appeal to the Supreme Court, and that takes another year. The court only accepts a very few number of cases filed in its original jurisdiction, and all of the ones that they've accepted in recent years have been those filed by public entities, like the Speaker of the House suing the governor. So this is one of the very few cases where a private litigant has been able to bring it in the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. They also almost immediately accepted the case. They didn't tarry or dilly-dally over it. They almost immediately accepted it. And then they put it on a very short briefing schedule. Typical civil litigation takes about a year, year and a half to go to trial. In their case, it went to trial, so to speak, in about a month. And they then schedule it very quickly for oral argument. Typically, when a case is appealed, It takes about a year, year and a half to get oral argument. In that case, the court scheduled it for oral argument in about 2 months. So the cases would be considered to be very, very much fast-tracked. And so those, from the business community's perspective and from consumers' perspective, that's can be a worrisome sign. There are additional agricultural exemptions today versus 1956, but they all serve the same common theme of basically preventing the whole, pyramiding of taxes on agricultural products. And so that's not binding on the court because that decision was, after all, in 1956. But that's a strong point in favor of the continuing validity of the agricultural exemptions. If the court rules dramatically on Bodman, of course, they'll have to deal with sales taxes whether they want to or not. And I think they all have some awareness, and if they acted in a dramatic fashion, obviously if they struck all the exemptions down, there's a 100% chance the General Assembly would deal with it. If they struck down a few exemptions but not all, remains to be seen whether the General Assembly would take that up or not. If the court is not ruled at all by January, I would expect the General Assembly or the House would probably introduce a bill, a sales tax bill, assign it to committee, just so they would have a vehicle if the Supreme Court ruled in the middle of the session.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things with the General Assembly. You're looking at tax reform, and there's always some form of tax reform that needs to take place. Property tax reform is always out there going. Even in, I think, the schools, we're looking at stuff, I think, with funding of education in schools, which is property tax and sales tax. We do need to reform, property tax and sales tax. Education is the big consumer of those two taxes, so, and we all want more money in the classroom, and I think we need to figure out how to get that money to the classroom, which would probably entail some forms of reform.
Hello, I'm John Frampton, former director with the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources. I retired back in March of 2012 and am now doing some consulting work and spending a lot more time with a whole bunch of grandkids. I think some of the water issues that South Carolina faces are going to be pretty significant in the future, and maybe some of the most significant things that the General Assembly is going to have to address over the next couple of decades. We've got problems in South Carolina with both groundwater as well as surface water, particularly down on the coast as it relates to saltwater intrusion. And then with the droughts that we've been experiencing in recent years, we see our groundwater levels dropping. And particularly in the Piedmont and upper part of the state, we're seeing wells that are actually going dry. I think everything that you are experiencing in this state in terms of water use and water allocation have to be considered. And the issue is who should have primary use of the water. Should it be residential from the domestic side? Should it be industry? Should it be agriculture? And there's got to be some fair allocation of that water resource. It is very limited, much more so than we ever thought of in the past. We're faced with a situation now that we're going to have to start looking at allocations. We're going to have to start looking at a water management plan that's going to put restrictions on all entities, not just industry, not just agriculture, not just the domestic use. But South Carolina is going to have to start addressing, water allocations, and they need to do it soon. If we're going to adequately manage water in the future in South Carolina, it's going to have to be a system that's based on volunteers. It's going to have to be a system on regulation. You can't do one without the other. And it is critical now that South Carolina put the time and the energy into developing an adequate water management plan that addresses all the issues that this state's going to face. And it looks at all the stakeholders and users of the water. You can't give high priority to one and totally neglect another. So, you've got industrial considerations, you've got domestic water supplies, you've got the agriculture, which is significant in this state. So all these kind of things have to be considered. It's unfortunate, though, that the resources have not been put on the table to adequately and effectively do a water management plan for South Carolina. And the longer we wait to do that, the more expensive it's going to be down the road. It's not going to be an easy thing to do, because when you bring all these stakeholders together, you know, everybody wants their interest, and they want it up front. So everybody's going to have to be willing to give and take and come to consensus. And I think, you know, we have to provide an opportunity for all the stakeholders to be at the table when we do this.
I'm the South Carolina House of Representatives of House District 4 of Pickens County, which comprises of Pickens, Liberty, Dacusville area. Born and raised in Pickens County, so I'm a homegrown talent. Farm Bureau is very important to me. Not only am I a state legislator, I am a member of Farm Bureau. One of the main things as a legislator that I found out in my 8 years of experience there is the simple fact that the more people can get involved from back home, the better off we are. Because we deal with so many folks that will give us information, that are the lobbyists, so to speak, that give us information about what they want us to know. But when I hear from someone back home concerned about an issue, concerned about something that means so much to them, that's when I start to pay attention and start trying to find out exactly what's going on with that issue. Serving on the Agriculture Committee as first vice chairman in the State House has been very beneficial to me relating to Farm Bureau, because Farm Bureau is one of the strongest organizations that I deal with. They're very well organized, and that's where you come in as members, because to continue to be well organized, to continue to be able to get your message across, you've got to get involved at the grassroots. You have representatives in Columbia that speak to us on a daily basis, and they do a great job representing you. But you are the backbone. You are the grassroots back home, where you simply say, hey, look, this is a concern to me. This affects me on my farm. This affects me in my business. And that's where we gather our information. And so to get involved, be involved, always ask questions of your legislator, not only of the folks on the Agriculture Committee, but of any legislator, to be involved and ask those questions that pertains to you. Don't wait till it's too late, because if that legislation's been passed and it's been enacted by the governor and it's already become law, it's too late then. You get started at the grassroots. You call, you get involved, you pick up the phone, you go visit someone, you talk to your other organizational members, and you just simply find out, hey, look, how can I make a difference? But you have to make a difference. Members are the difference at Farm Bureau, and that's what makes them such a strong organization, not only in Pickens County, but throughout the state.